It's a beautiful day to blaze some good, a beautiful day to blaze some good. Would you be kind? Please light mine. All right. Welcome back to Beans and Greens. I'm Steve, and we're doing something different. Now, in previous episodes, We talked about different movies, and it was sort of surface level stuff that we talked about. The patterns were real easy to spot, so I didn't necessarily go into it sort of like an academic. You didn't necessarily need a decoder ring to figure out what was going on. It was just stuff that was on the top, and I was kind of going off the cuff. And for the most part, there were a lot of, sometimes there were points that I missed, and things that I wanted to describe that I just by not scripting it out, I didn't properly hit all the points, right? So now, but today we're talking about Wizard of Oz. That's the movie in question. And I'm telling you right now, this movie is not about a girl trying to get back home to Kansas. And we'll definitely go over in detail and in a more scripted fashion here in just a moment. But real quick, before I really, really, really want to go, so there's a couple of things I'd like to talk about. The first thing is, obviously the main thing. Go ahead and roll up. Or, in my case, light up. You know how that goes. All right, no. So the other thing is the other shit, the like and subscribe. I don't know, maybe if you don't mind, go ahead and subscribe. You know what I mean? Now, Wizard of Oz. So again, like I said, moving forward and then going ahead, I'm going to sort of script out on my episodes, especially for these next couple episodes, where I'm going to get into things a little bit deeper. These things, a lot of this is conspiracy talk, and obviously from my premise, these are things that are actually going on in real life, but there has to be a way that we get to that point. And these next movies sort of describe one of the things that we've done to get to the points that we are at now, right? Okay, so now we're gonna hit on Wizard of Oz. Of course, like I mentioned, this movie is not about a young girl getting back to going back to Kansas. This movie is a warning. Now, it's a warning about a changing financial system, a warning about a strawman system, a warning about a maritime admiralty law system. And at the end of the episode, you're never going to watch this film the same way again. So, in essence, this goes from, this movie is again, like I said, it's a warning, but it talks about, or symbolic, or symbolizes the change from a true financial system to what we call the strawman system. Now, what is the strawman system? And now, what I want to do before I break down the characters in the movie is, like I said, is we have to understand the foundation. And the first thing is that strawman system, the foundation of the strawman system. Now, of course, I understand it sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, but understand the strawman theory, and I want to emphasize this is a theory central to many anti-government and tax protest movements, right? So again, this being a conspiracy podcast, the strawman theory is very central to a lot of the financial constraints we as the straw men are put through. Now, strawman theory claims that every person has two separate personas, right? You have your physical flesh and blood self. That's the real you. The one sitting in the chair right now watching, right? Or me sitting here smoking my J, drinking my coffee. Now, there's an artificial corporate entity created by the government. That's the second. When you're issued a birth certificate, the government registers you as a corporation. They turn you into an asset, basically a legal fiction. And according to this theory, all legal, financial, and tax obligations belong exclusively to this artificial straw man, not the real living person. Now, of course, the real living person has to live out this, right? I mean, you have to actually do the work. You actually have to pay the taxes. You actually pay the penalties if you don't abide by this. Now, here's where it gets even stranger, right? The believers claim that the straw man falls under maritime admiralty law. So that's the system. And this means it's a government treats you like cargo, like a ship in commerce. So you're not really you're not a living human in the eyes of the court. You're a vessel, and that's why legal documents are in all capital letters. That's why your name is written in all caps on court papers, right? That represents your straw man. Now they're addressing the corporation, not the actual man. And the Wizard of Oz basically is a cinematic roadmap on how the system was implemented and how the American public was deceived into accepting this system. And it's through the characters we see how each person is represented and each entity sort of represented in this system. This change from the sort of normal, and we'll also learn it was basically what we call the silver certificates and gold standard, which was the previous system of our financial system, which basically means that the money was backed by actual a tangible resource, which was gold or silver. And as we see, just to sort of double back, instead of money being backed by these tangible resources being gold and silver, in essence, through the creation of a straw man governed by maritime admiralty laws, money is really essentially being backed by your labor, by you. You being the commodity. Let's go back a few weeks to another movie that we highlighted on the podcast, Animal Farm. Right? That goes back to us being treated as cattle on the animal farm. And for the most part, the masses don't understand that. And again, these messages of these things are being coded in these movies. So now we look at the characters, right? So we have the first main character, Dorothy. Dorothy and the American public. Now, as the protagonist, Dorothy Gale, on the surface, right? It was a sweet girl with a dog, right? Just a normal, everyday, down home person. But as we, look at and dig deeper into the character, right, we see that she represents the innocence of every man. The naive public that's naive to what's going on in the backgrounds. Now, what we see in the movie is she's swept up by a cyclone, which is metaphorically, we have a cyclone of financial upheaval, which the everyman was wrapped up in. That's the reference. Now, one of the things we see is the tornado, right? It's basically a metaphor for it was for the chaos of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Now, you had the panic of 1893, right, which led to the depression, which led to the rise in industrial monopolies, right? American people at that time were uprooted, tossed around, and deposited somewhere completely foreign. And Dorothy basically represents the average citizen, disoriented, afraid, and desperately trying to find their way home. So, in essence, what we see in that time, and we see this happening even to this day, where the financial instability means you have to a lot of times get up and leave where you live because you don't have the money to pay for it. So you end up in places like in such places that we have now, like ghettos, trailer parks. You have people that have to leave whole states because it's the cost of living is so high. People having to leave countries and cities, and I know one in particular, Hawaii. A lot of people a lot of native Hawaiians even I've heard of leaving Hawaii just due to the fact that the cost of living is so high. Hell, New York is one of those places. Shit, I go back and originally from there, Brooklyn, and I don't mind going back to visit, but I mean the changes in the fact that there's more of an immigrant population, the fact that just everything in New York has changed is not a reason for me to not want to go there, because New York has always been a mixed city, so that's just a bullshit. That's just some bullshit that was created by the news. It's the fucking price of living. Fuck that. They're struggling here in Florida. Just imagine struggling in New York. Anyway, so the next characters we and right now we're dealing with the everyman, the everyday man. So we have Dorothy Gale, but next we have Auntie M and Uncle Henry. And about Auntie M and Uncle Henry, they're not really background characters. They actually represent the struggling, debt-ridden American public, caught between political forces they can't control. Which, again, back in those days, it was basically the bankers, the robber barons. Now, we have Uncle Henry, right? He's a hardworking, oppressed American farmer. And we see that today, not just as a farmer, but also representing just the everyday worker. Now, he's been worn down by physical labor and economic hardship. Now, a man such as Uncle Henry is the backbone of America, the agrarian worker, but he's drowning in debt. Then we have Auntie M, right? She's very sort of portrayed as sort of a stoic pioneer wife, right? She's had hope beaten out of her by years of struggle and loss. It's Auntie M and Uncle Henry. See, they as a couple represent every American family at the time, right? And at that time, again, like I've always mentioned, you can transpose it to every time afterwards, up until now. They represent us even now. So they represent the struggling family, hopeless, right? And at the mercy of forces larger than themselves. So we see that this is, around the early 1900s, 1920s, 1930s, prior to World War II. We see these same struggles represented even now in a whole new century. Now, turn the page. We have a Miss Elmira Gulch. And now, you see in the movie, Elmira Gulch actually turns from, this basically, the first thing, let me say, she represents the first Karen that I've ever seen represented on a big screen. That's the first Karen ever. Right now, she's not just a grumpy neighbor who wants to kill Toto. Right? What Elmira Gulch symbolizes is the wealth and tyrannical ruling class. Right? The banking elites, the technocrats. Right? She has the power, she has authority, and she uses it to crush little guy. Now she wants to take away Dorothy's only comfort, which is her dog, her companion. And basically, in the conspiracy world, that's the elite taking away our freedoms. That's what that represents. So you see how each sort of point that I've made so far not only represents that time, but also represents now. So right from the beginning of this movie, right, there's an establishment of the conflict, right, between the common people versus the ruling class, right? We see that represented initially with Miss Gulch wanting to take Toto and have him destroyed. Again, it's a metaphor, just like it's stated for them when you take away our freedoms. And we see this happening every day now. Like I said, it let's go a little bit more, because I really sort of there's going to be so much more, right? Now we have the main characters, right? Now we have our three farmhands, which eventually turn into the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion, right? So we have Hunk, Hickory, and Zeke, right? And there we accounted them in the barn. And again, these are the ones that make the transition to Tin Man, Scarecrow, and the Lion. Now we have the three farmhands, and I'm telling you that these are the most important characters in the entire movie, because when they enter Oz, they transform into the three pillars of the new financial system. So first, the Scarecrow, the Straw Man. First, we have the Scarecrow in the real world. He's Hunk, a farmhand, but in Oz, he becomes the Scarecrow, and he wants a brain. But now, here's the truth. The Scarecrow represents the Straw Man itself. And if we think about it, what is the Scarecrow? It's a hollow figure made of straw. It looks like a man, but has no substance, no real life. It's an empty vessel. And that's actually what the government creates when they register your birth. You become a straw man, a hollow legal fiction. Now, he wants a brain. He wants to be smart. And in the system, he's already part of the system. He's the paper entity that the government uses to tax you, to sue you, to control you. He's the legal fiction, and he doesn't even know it. That's a sort of poetic tragedy. Now we have the Tin Man. Tin, Tin, the tax ID number. He represents the tax ID number or social security number. Now, with the Tin Man, in the real world, he's the farmhand Hickory, another that's on the farm, obviously. Now he becomes the Tin Man, and he wants a heart. But now, as we look up, now we listen to closely to the name Tin, Tin. Tin stands for tax identification number, which again, like I mentioned previously, is social security number, and social security number that has 9 digits. What else has 9 digits? Bank accounts. Something else that has 9 digits that I've also learned was something called a QSIP number, right? And QSIP number is how stocks are identified on the stock market by 9 digits. Number 9. I know numerically and sort of I looked it up in the gematria as well. I mean, there's something there to that. Let me see if I still have it up. It says in gematria, 9 primarily corresponds to the Hebrew letter Tet, symbolizing divine completeness, new beginnings, and the absolute truth. So there's something there to the number 9. So now, the Tin Man is the tax ID, the bank account, the stock certificate, all rolled into one. He's the financial identity. He's numb, he's mechanical, and he wants a heart because he knows he's been stripped of his humanity. The system has turned him into a machine. Now he's rusted because the system is broken, and he needs oil, lubrication to function. And what does he want? A heart. He wants to feel human again, but the system does not allow that. He basically represents how the financial system dehumanizes you, takes away your identity and replaces it with a number. Now, and finally, we have the Cowardly Lion. Now, in the world, he's Zeke, the third farmhand in Oz. He's the lion, and he wants courage. But what the lion represents is the politician who's too scared to fight the financiers and oligarchs, the politician who knows that the financial system is coming, but is too afraid to stand in its way. Now, why is he a coward? Because he's bought off. Most of the politicians around the 1900s were. And they ushered in this new system. Now, it's a system that was reportedly created, and again, conspiratorially, on Jekyll Island. Now, it's reported in November 1910, a group of the richest bankers in America, including J.P. Morgan, Nelson Aldrich, and others, met secretly on Jekyll Island, Georgia, and they drafted up the plan for what would become the Federal Reserve, new banking system. Now, of course, they didn't ask the American people, and they certainly didn't ask Congress. They just did it. Now, the politicians either were scared or they were complicit. And that's why the lion is a coward. He roars but has no bite. He's been bought and paid for. So Dorothy's three companions are the straw man, the tax system, and the bought politician. The holy trinity of the New World Order. Now, before we get to the Emerald City, we have to talk about a historical event that ties in. It ties everything together, right? Could be another movie that I would display and break down. Only I didn't really like the representation of the movie. It was sort of pompous, but it definitely is an event that ties in to everything here with Wizard of Oz. Now this movie is the Titanic. Now the Titanic wasn't just a ship. It was a ship full of bankers and politicians. And here's where the theory of these people who oppose this is the theory, right? These were the people who opposed the new banking system that was being laid out in the Wizard of Oz. Now they opposed, but they were elite. Why would they oppose such a system? Now, among the elite, there were factions, right? There's factions. Each family is basically a faction. Now, the ones on the Titanic were part of the old money, the European aristocracy, the ones who didn't want the Federal Reserve System. They knew what was coming. They knew Jacob Island bankers were creating a global financial tyranny. Now, the ship was deliberately sunk to kill them and to eliminate the opposition. Like I said before, I could include this movie in the episode, but it's one thing. The movie itself doesn't actually show anything historical, and that was basically the point, right? It was to hide the true nefarious nature of the event. Now, the Titanic wasn't an accident; it was an assassination. They took out the bankers and the politicians who were a threat to the new system. The Wizard of Oz was the warning that's been ignored. Now, we're going to talk about the Emerald City, the Yellow Brick Road, and Oz. So, first destination we talk about is the Emerald City. Now, on the surface, it's a beautiful green city, but what is it really? The Emerald City represents Wall Street and the Federal Reserve. And the Yellow Brick Road, that's gold, the gold standard. Now, let's follow the Yellow Brick Road. Follow the gold. The road is made of gold, leading you straight to the financial system. But here's the twist. When you get to the Emerald City, everything is green. But it's all an illusion. It's not actually made of emeralds. It's just green glass. And now, the characters have to wear green glasses to enter the city. Green glasses basically represent propaganda. They are the lines the system tells you. They are the lies the system tells you to make you believe everything is beautiful and perfect. Again, glasses to blind you of seeing what's real. Let's go back to They Live, which I'm going to redo. Now we have the Wizard. He's basically the president or the Federal Reserve chairman, manipulating the masses from behind the curtain. He's not powerful. He's just a man pulling the levers, projecting the image. Now, when he says, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, that's exactly what the government says. Don't look at how the system really works. Just trust us. I mean, again, as I make each of these statements, think about the past few years. Even for those of you who watching this that aren't born, you know, sort of newer generations, millennials and such, you can see what's you can definitely put an imprint or see the imprint of what's going on even now. And this goes back to the 1930s and 1920s. Now, we have the name Oz. The land of Oz, OZ, ounce. It's the measurement for gold. Gold was measured and sold by the ounce. Now, and I believe still is, the entire story is about gold. It's about the gold standard and about government taking the country off the gold standard. Now, we have Dorothy's slippers, right? Now, in the original book, they are silver. In the film, they're ruby changed for Technicolor. But the silver represents free silver, the movement in the late 19th century, right? Now, the free silver movement wanted to back U.S. currency with both gold and silver to help struggling farmers and workers. Dorothy's silver slippers are the key to going home, and that's the key to fixing the system. But in the film, they changed them to ruby. And so that's where the symbolism got lost. But as we bring these things back in podcasts and in actual book, we definitely have to tell you it was a representation of silver and putting a system back onto the silver standard. Now, everything in this film represents the monetary policy debate. Every single character, every single symbol, and when you understand that, the entire movie changes. So, now let's talk about control of the masses, and that's represented with the Wicked Witch and the Flying Monkeys. Now, the Wicked Witch represents the corrupt financial elite. She controls the Flying Monkeys, who represents the enforcers, the tax collectors, the IRS, the police, the military, when the system needs to enforce its will. Of course, what they do, send the Flying Monkeys. Now, they come after Dorothy. They come after anyone who threatens the status quo. Dorothy represents the people who still remember the gold standard. Now, who still believe in real money, who don't trust the Federal Reserve, the Wicked Witch, the banking elite. So they want to destroy Dorothy. Now, how does the Wicked Witch die? Water. Now, it's a pure natural element. Water is a symbol of honesty and transparency. And when Dorothy exposes the witch with water, the witch dissolves. And she can't stand up to the truth. And of course, obviously, what happens in the movie, she goes back to, after dealing with Oz and, basically being gaslit, to use a new term by Oz, she ends up going back to Kansas. Right. She goes back to Kansas, and that's where you see the change in color in the movie, and everything is black and white and it's boring. So she exposes the banking elite and goes back to her boring life. And so, see, there's the tragedy of the system of everything. Dorothy had the power all along. She had the silver slippers, her ability to change the system, but she didn't realize it. She had to learn that there's no place like home, but home was the problem. Home was a broken system. Now she returns to the same struggles, the same debt, the same control, elite, because she was given the illusion of her journey, right? But the real battle, the battle for the monetary freedom, was lost. See, the movie is a warning that went unheeded. Now, it's a warning about the elite manipulating the masses, a warning about the creation of the Federal Reserve, a warning about the straw man system and maritime law. So, just as a recap, we've learned today through this movie, The Wizard of Oz. So we have one, Dorothy Gale represents the naive American public swept up in financial political chaos. Two, Aunt Em and Uncle Henry represent struggling debt-ridden American farmer. Three, Miss Amira Gulch represents wealthy tyrannical banking elite. Four, the Scarecrow represents the straw man, legal fiction created by the government. Five, Tin Man represents the tax identification number, the financial identity that dehumanizes you. Six, the Cowardly Lion represents the border of politicians who were too scared to fight these bankers. Seven, the Emerald City represents Wall Street and the Federal Reserve. Eight, Yellow Brick Road represents the gold standard. Nine, the name Oz stands for ounce, the measurement of gold. 10, Dorothy's silver slippers represent the free silver movement. And just as a side, the Titanic, that was an assassination of the opposition, not some fucking sort of pompous love story about some rich woman who fell in love with some poor man and let him die. Like, whatever. So, like I always say, movies are not just about passing time and having fun. Entertainment is about entertaining thoughts. And these are thoughts of whatever the creator wants to communicate. And it's embedded in the film. Like L. Frank Baum, right? He was a populist. He supported the free silver movement. He believed in the common man. His book was a political allegory about the struggle between agrarian working class and the financial elite. So, what's the takeaway for us today? First, to understand that the financial system is not natural. It was created by men, and it can, of course, be changed. Second, be aware of the straw man. Your legal identity is not real, and don't give all your power to this fiction. Third, don't trust the man behind the curtain, the politicians, the bankers, the Federal Reserve. Of course, they're not gods, they're just men. And can be exposed. And finally, remember that home isn't just a place, it's a state of freedom. And until we reclaim the gold standard and something real, we're all just following the yellow brick road to nowhere. Follow the yellow brick road to nowhere. The day is long, the sun is hot. You might as well smoke if you got some pot. I'm out.